The first thing Ward noticed about Aurelius Crossing was the smell: metal, recycled air, and something faintly burnt, like old circuits pushed too hard for too long. The second thing he noticed was that nobody looked at him. Not in a rude way, not exactly. It was more like the way people stop noticing a chair after it has been in the same corner long enough. Ward was 38 years old, medium height, average build, with the kind of face that made people forget him 5 minutes after meeting him. He had worked security contracts on 6 stations across 3 star systems, and in every single one of them, he had been a chair. He did not mind. Chairs were useful. Chairs were there. He clocked in at the lower docking rings just after the first shift rotation. The lower rings were the part of the station nobody important wanted. Supply haulers, cargo manifests, coolant line inspections, and the slow grinding work of keeping a floating city alive. The diplomats lived up on Deck 7. The military brass had Deck 9. Down here on the lower rings, it was just Ward, his colleague Doss, and about 40 other people who kept everything moving without being thanked for it. Doss was already leaning against the checkpoint rail when Ward arrived, holding a cup of something hot and smelling the steam off it like it was the most important thing in the world. "Anything on the overnight log?" Ward asked. "Coolant seal on Bay 14 is reading low again," Doss said. "Third time this week. I flagged it. Nobody answered. You want to guess what happens next?" "It fails on a shift we're responsible for." Every time Doss offered him the cup, Ward shook his head. "You're going to walk the full ring again, aren't you?" "That's the job." "The job is to stand at the checkpoint and look official." Nobody said anything about walking the full ring. Ward was already walking. He did the ring in just under an hour. It was not exciting work. He checked pressure seals, tested emergency locks, logged a cracked floor panel near Bay 11, and noted that the cargo manifest on Bay 19 had a discrepancy, a registered weight that did not match the listed contents by about 300 kilograms. He wrote it down. He would file it when he got back. It was on his second pass, near Bay 12, that he heard the voice. "What are you checking for?" He turned. She was small, even by Dracori child standards, barely up to his shoulder, covered in pale bronze-green scales, with eyes the color of deep amber. She was dressed in what passed for informal Dracori clothing, which still looked more formal than anything Ward owned. She was standing in the access alcove beside the maintenance panel, watching him with her head slightly tilted, like she was trying to figure out what category of thing he belonged to. "Pressure variance," Ward said. "This seal loses about 0.5% every 72 hours. I want to know if it's drifting faster." "Why does it lose pressure?" "Microfracture in the join, probably from thermal cycling." "Why haven't they replaced it?" "They flagged it 3 weeks ago. Parts are on a supply order." "Why is the supply order taking 3 weeks?" He looked at her. "Are you supposed to be down here?" "I am asking the questions," she said, with the kind of confidence that only very young beings and very senior diplomats ever managed. "My name is Rava. My father is part of the diplomatic delegation on Deck 7. What is your name?" "Ward." "Ward," she repeated, like she was cataloging it. "You are human." "Yes." "Humans have very short lifespans." "Compared to Dracori, yes." "Does that bother you?" He thought about it honestly, not usually. She seemed to find this interesting. She opened her mouth to ask something else, and then a sharp voice cut through the bay, a Dracori attendant, older, clearly alarmed, calling a name in Dracori that Ward assumed was Rava's formal title. The girl closed her mouth, straightened her posture in about a quarter of a second, and transformed entirely from a curious child into something that looked like a very small diplomat. "I have to go," she said. "I noticed." She left. The attendant ushered her away without looking at Ward once. Doss appeared from around the corner. "Was that a Dracori kid?" "Yes." "Did she just wander down here on her own?" "Apparently." "And you just talked to her?" "She asked questions, I answered them." Ward pulled out his log pad and kept walking. "She's curious, that's not a problem." The Dracori attendants might disagree. Ward filed the precious seal note, the cracked panel, and the cargo manifest discrepancy when he got back to the checkpoint. He sent all three to Commander Hale's office through the standard reporting channel. The first two got automatic acknowledgement receipts. The cargo manifest discrepancy got nothing. He noted that too, filed it in his personal log. Doss watched him do it. You know nobody's going to read that. Probably not, Ward agreed. So why write it? Ward looked at him. Because it happened. Doss shook his head slowly, like a man watching someone do something that makes no sense but somehow can't be argued with. He finished his drink. They went back to work. Down on the lower ring, the coolant seal on Bay 14 kept running low. The supply order sat unanswered. The manifest discrepancy sat in Ward's log. And somewhere on Deck 7, a small Dracori girl was almost certainly asking her attendants why human lifespans were so short and not finding their answers satisfying. Rava found him again the next day. Ward was in the middle of rechecking the Bay 14 coolant line when he heard the same unhurried footsteps from behind him. He did not turn around immediately. He finished writing the reading in his log, still low, still drifting, and then looked over his shoulder. She was standing 6 feet away, hands folded in front of her, watching him with the same cataloging expression as before. "You came back," Ward said. "I wanted to know if the seal had been replaced." "It hasn't. That seems inefficient." "It is." He capped his pen. "Did you take a wrong turn again?" Rival looked at him steadily. "I did not take a wrong turn the first time." He let that sit for a moment. Then he went back to his log. She drifted closer and watched what he was writing. "Do you do this every day?" she asked. "Walk the ring, yes. And you write everything down. Everything worth writing." She was quiet for a moment. "My attendants write things down too, but only when someone tells them to." Ward said nothing. He moved to the next section of the line. Riva followed, keeping pace without being asked, like she had decided that where he was going was also where she was going. "I have a question," she said. "You had 7 questions yesterday." "I have more today." She paused. "Humans build things that take longer than a human lifetime to finish. I read about it. Your people built a station in the Velos system that took 140 years to complete. No human who started it lived to see it done. Why do you do that?" Ward thought about it as he checked the next seal, because the next group of humans needed it. But the builders never saw it. "No. That seems like a poor reward for the effort." Ward looked at her. "Do you only do things if you're going to be there for the result?" Riva opened her mouth, closed it. This was apparently a question she had not considered. "That is different," she said finally. "Is it?" She did not answer, but she kept following him. It continued like that for the next 5 days. Riva would appear somewhere along Ward's patrol route, never in the same spot twice, always as though she had simply happened to be there, though it was obvious she had not simply happened to be anywhere. She asked him questions. He answered them. When she asked bad questions, ones built on wrong assumptions, he told her they were bad questions and explained why. She did not seem to mind. She corrected herself and asked better ones. On the 4th day, she brought him something. She held it out in both hands, a small, dark stone, smooth and flat, with a faint pattern in it that shifted depending on the angle of the light. "What is this?" Ward asked. "A data stone. It is a Dracori object. We give them to mark a thing." "What thing?" "I find you interesting," she said, as though this were a straightforward and sufficient explanation. Ward took the stone. It was warm in his palm. "Thank you." He meant it. She seemed to know that. The next day, Ward gave her something in return, a small deck of printed cards, a human game he had carried since his second posting. Simple rules, quick rounds, and more depth underneath than the rules suggested. He showed her how to play. She beat the rule set in 20 minutes and told him there was a logical flaw in the scoring system. She was right. Meanwhile, the flag Ward had written on the cargo manifest in Bay 19 was generating its own quiet trouble. On the sixth day, Commander Hale called him into the checkpoint office, a room barely big enough for a desk, and two people standing uncomfortably close together. "Your manifest flag," Hale said. He was a careful man, the kind who chose his words the way a person chooses which ice to step on. "Deck 7 has been in contact with Cargo Administration." "Did they run the weight reconciliation?" "The cargo in question belongs to a Dracori trade partner operating under the diplomatic logistics umbrella." Hale set the report down. Poking at Dracori cargo during an active diplomatic rotation is not something Station Command wants to do right now. "The numbers don't match." "What? 300 kilograms, that's not a rounding error." "Drop it," Hale's voice was not unkind. "I know how you work. I know you're going to want to keep pulling on it. I'm asking you not to. Let the diplomats do their thing, and we'll review the manifest after the delegation leaves." Ward looked at him for a moment, then he nodded. He went back to his patrol route. He did not pull on the manifest, but he did start noticing other things, small things, access timestamps on 3 bays that did not quite line up with logged personnel movements, a coolant line that someone had shut down and restarted at a strange hour, 2 more weight irregularities in adjacent bays that had not been flagged by anyone else. He wrote all of it down in his personal log. Doss, watching him updated at the end of the shift, shook his head. "You know what I think." "I know what you think," Ward said. "I think you're poking at the thing Hale told you to leave alone." "I'm not touching the manifest." "You're standing very close to it." Ward closed the log. He picked up the Dracori data stone from his chest pocket. He had been carrying it since Ravag gave it to him, and turned it over once in his hand. "Something is in those bays," he said. "I don't know what yet, but it's there." Doss looked at the stone. "The Dragon Kid give you that?" "Yes." "And now you're not going to let this go." Ward put the stone back in his pocket and stood up to start the next round. "I was not going to let it go before," he said. "She just makes it feel more worth mentioning." It started with a sound that did not belong. Ward had spent enough years on stations to know the difference between the noises that meant something and the noises that did not. The groan of a stressed cargo clamp, the hiss of a pressure equalization, the hollow echo of footsteps in an empty corridor, all of those were background, normal, part of the air. What he heard from the junction near Bay 8 was not background. It was controlled, careful, the sound of people trying very hard to be quiet, which was itself a kind of noise if you knew what silence sounded like. He clicked his radio twice, the signal for Doss to hold position, and moved closer to the junction. He did not find out what was in Bay 8. He never got the chance. The blast came from Deck 3, not the lower ring. The station shuddered, not a catastrophic shudder, not a hull breach, but enough to knock a standing man sideways and send every alarm on the lower level into a screaming cascade of red light. Ward caught himself on a support strut and was already moving before the second alarm joined the first. Later he would learn the full shape of it. A small, organized group, 6 people, had used the access anomalies he had flagged, the ones in the bays near the manifest discrepancy, to position themselves inside the station's internal logistics network. They had used that access to get close to Deck 3 during a public diplomatic ceremony. They were not military. They were not foreign agents. They were human. A fringe group who had decided the Dracori were pulling the strings of human trade policy, and that the delegation on Aurelius Crossing was the reason. They were angry, they were wrong about most of their reasons, and they were very well prepared. But Ward did not know any of that yet. What he knew, as he ran toward the sound, was that the station's emergency partitions were dropping, sealing sections to contain the chaos, and that the diplomatic ceremony was on Deck 3, and that Rava had told him only yesterday that she was required to attend it. He took the maintenance ladder, faster than the lifts, which were already locking down. He came up through a service hatch on the east side of Deck 3 into a corridor full of running people and screaming alarms, and he had exactly 3 seconds to get his bearings before he saw her. Reva was moving the wrong direction. She was alone, separated from her attendants in the crush of bodies, too small to hold ground in a crowd of panicking adults. She was moving fast, and she was smart enough to be moving away from the main noise, but she did not know this section of the deck, and she was heading toward a dead-end maintenance corridor with no way out. Ward ran. He caught up to her as she reached the dead-end turn, took her by the arm, felt her flinch and tense, and said, "It's me, Ward, don't stop." She looked at him for half a second, then she ran with him. He did not take her back toward the ceremony. The emergency partitions had cut that route. Instead, he took her down, back through the maintenance ladder, back into the lower ring, into the corridor network he had walked every day for 14 months and knew like the lines of his own hands. He knew which corridors were wide enough for a Dracori adult to follow them. He knew which ones were not. He used the ones that were not. It was not a clean escape. 2 of the group had followed the same partition logic Ward had and come down into the lower ring looking for exactly the kind of side exit Ward was using. He heard them before he saw them, that same controlled quiet, pressed up against a junction wall near Bay 6. Ward put Reva behind him and moved through the junction fast, using the angle of the corner the way the station's layout had always suggested someone could, and the first man did not have time to react before Ward was on him. It was not a fair fight. Ward had not been expecting a fair fight. He had been expecting a corner and a half-second of surprise, and he used both. The second man was faster. Ward took a hit to his left side, something sharp, something that burned, and went down to one knee. He got back up. He put the second man down with the kind of effort that left his hands shaking. He could hear a third set of footsteps now, coming fast, from the wrong direction. He looked at the bulkhead door to his right. Bay 7, storage alcove beyond it, one exit from the outside, but solid walls, a lock Ward knew the code to, and enough distance from the main access routes that it would take anyone without his knowledge of the ring at least 6 minutes to find it. He looked at Reva. She was watching him, not afraid, not crying, just watching with those amber eyes that already seemed to understand what he was about to do before he had fully decided it himself. "In there," he said, "lock it from inside. Don't open it until you hear Dracori voices." "Ward, go." She went, the door sealed. He heard the lock engage. Ward turned back to the corridor. His left side was bad, not as bad as it could have been, but bad enough that his body was starting to give him the kind of information he would have preferred not to have. He found a position near the junction wall. He steadied his breathing the way he had learned to do a long time ago, on a different station, in a different kind of trouble. 3 men came around the corner. He was still standing when Guardian Nera broke through the external service hatch 4 minutes later, because Ward had made sure to seal that too, and it took her almost the full 4 minutes to cut through it. The 3 men were not standing. Ward was not standing either by then. He was on the floor, and the corridor was very quiet, and the last thing he saw clearly was Reva's face through the small viewport in the bay door, watching him, still not afraid, before the lights went out. Ward woke up to a ceiling he did not recognize. The light was different, warmer, amber-tinted, like the inside of something alive. The air smelled of something mineral and faintly sweet. The surface beneath him was softer than any station medical bunk he had ever used, and the room was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the quiet had been arranged for, not simply happened. He tried to sit up. His left side informed him very clearly that this was a poor idea. He lay back down. "You should not do that for another few hours." The voice came from the corner of the room. Ward turned his head slowly. Nera was standing with her arms crossed, her back against the wall, watching him with an expression that communicated approximately nothing. She was younger than Elder Kova, Ward would learn that later, but she carried herself like someone who had been in enough serious situations to stop being impressed by them. She was Dracori Guardian, and it showed in every line of her posture. "Where am I?" Ward asked. "Dracori Medical Bay, Deck 7. He processed this. The human medical section is on deck 4. Yes. Why am I here? Nira's expression shifted very slightly. Rival would not stop making noise until you were moved here. Our medical resources gave you a better outcome than the human section would have. She said it the way someone says a fact they did not particularly want to be a fact. You are welcome. She left before he could respond. The room was more comfortable than it had any right to be. Ward spent most of the first day sleeping, which his body seemed to require regardless of his opinion on the matter. On the second day, Commander Hale visited. Hale stood inside the door with the careful energy of a man who had been rehearsing what to say and still was not sure it was right. He told Ward that the attack investigation was open, that 6 individuals were in custody, that 3 more were being sought, and that the political situation between the Human Station Administration and the Dracori delegation was extremely complicated right now. I need you to stay quiet, Hale said. Recover. Let the people with the right authority handle the diplomatic side. Did anyone pull the full access logs from the cargo bays I flagged? Ward asked. His voice came out steadier than he expected. Hale was quiet for a moment. That is part of the investigation now. I flagged it twice, weeks ago. I know, Hale looked at the floor. I know you did, Ward. That was as close to an acknowledgement as Hale was built to give. He left not long after. Ward asked a Dracori attendant, one of the medical staff, who treated him with distant professionalism and absolutely no small talk, for something to do. The attendant brought him a data reader loaded with what turned out to be Dracori navigational records, which was not what Ward had meant, but which he read anyway because he had nothing else. Riva came on the 3rd day. She arrived without her attendants, which meant she had found a way to come without them, which Ward suspected took more planning than most adults gave her credit for. She was carrying something in both hands, another data stone. She set it on the surface beside his bed without preamble. That is the second one, she said. What does it mean? The first one meant I find you interesting, she said. This one means I am glad you did not die. She said it with the same directness she brought to everything, but there was something underneath it, not quite emotion, not the way a human child would show it, but something that took up space in the room. Your attendants told you not to come, Ward said. They told me it was politically inconvenient. And I disagreed with them. She sat in the chair beside the bed, had clearly decided to sit in it before she entered the room. I told my father everything, exactly what happened, in the order it happened. What did he say? He did not say much, he listened. She looked at Ward carefully. My father listens more than he speaks. That is why he is a good diplomat. Ward turned the new stone over in his hand. It was darker than the first, heavier. You could have run when I was fighting, Riva said. It was not a question. The external hatch behind the storage alcove connects to a secondary corridor. I saw it when I was inside. You could have used it. I know. Why didn't you? Ward thought about how to say it in a way that was honest and not more than was needed. Because you would have had to watch me run, and there was another option. Riva looked at him for a long time. That is a strange reason. Probably. She did not say it was wrong. Elder Kova arrived on the 4th day. Ward had not been told she was coming. She walked into the room, sat in the chair beside his bed with the slow deliberateness of a being who had chosen every movement for so long that nothing she did was accidental, and she looked at him in silence for almost a full minute. Then she said, I have read your station logs. Ward said nothing. All 14 months, she continued, including the 2 flagged reports that were not answered. She let that sit. You are a precise man. I try to be. Precision is uncommon. Consistent precision without reward or acknowledgement is rarer. She tilted her head very slightly. I wanted to see what you looked like. She stood up. She moved to the door. Ward, because he felt he had to ask something, said, What do I look like? Elder Kova paused at the door. She did not turn around fully, just enough. "Familiar," she said. Then she was gone, and Ward was left holding a Dracori data stone in each hand, in a room that smelled of minerals and old warmth, trying to figure out what that meant. The Dracori medical bay did not have much to do in it. That turned out to be useful. Ward was a man who did his best thinking when his hands were occupied with something routine, but since routine was not available, he fell back on the second best option, watching and listening and piecing things together from what he saw. Nira kept coming back. She did not seem entirely sure why. She would arrive, stand in the corner, and either watch him read or ask him something that sounded like it had been sitting in her mind since the last visit. On the fifth day, she asked him about the three men in the corridor. "I reviewed the security recording," she said. "Before you sealed the bay door, you had a different defensive option. You could have put Ravin inside, retreated through the alcove, and held a second position closer to the external hatch. Your survival odds at that position were statistically better." "About 20% better," Ward agreed. "You knew that." "Not in exact numbers, but yes." Nira was quiet for a moment. "Then why did you choose the junction?" Ward set down the data reader. He had been thinking about how to answer this since she walked in, because he had a feeling she was going to ask. If I retreated, she would have been alone in the bay for longer, listening to what was happening outside and not knowing how it was going. She is 9 years old. Nira stared at him. "That is the reason. That is part of it. You accepted worse odds for yourself, so that a child would not have to experience fear for a longer period of time." "That is a very precise way to put it." "I am trying to understand it precisely." She looked genuinely frustrated, not with him, Ward thought, but with the fact that the logic did not fit into any category she already had. In Dracori tactical doctrine, the protection of the asset takes priority over the comfort of the asset. Your choice was suboptimal by that standard. "Yes, and yet the outcome was the same. She was protected." "Yes, so your method was inefficient, produced the same result, and cost you more personal damage." She paused. "And you would do it the same way again?" Ward thought about it honestly. "Yes." Nira left without saying anything else, but she came back the next day. The investigation broke on the 7th day of Ward's recovery. It broke loudly. Ward heard it from his room, raised voices in Dracori down the corridor, which was unusual, because the Dracori Ward had met did not raise their voices except when something genuinely significant had shifted. He pieced together the rest from what Doss told him when Doss visited that afternoon, practically vibrating with the news. The cargo network Ward had flagged was connected to a funding structure that had been supporting the extremist cell for over a year. 3 of the bays with weight discrepancies had been used as dead drop points, compartments where materials and money changed hands under the cover of routine freight. The same network connected to 2 other stations. The people involved were not random. They were organized, patient, and they had been using the access gap between human station administration and Dracori cargo oversight to stay invisible. Invisible to everyone except Ward, who had noticed a 300-kilogram discrepancy in a manifest and written it down. Admiral Sorn called a closed session with Station Command. Ward was not in it, but Doss knew someone who was standing outside the door and reported that Sorn's voice, when presented with Ward's 2 flagged reports and the dates on them, had gone very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that, in a Dracori, was worse than shouting. Sorn had been the one whose political directive told human security staff to avoid friction with Dracori cargo partners. He had not known what he was protecting, but he had given the order. Elder Kova visited Ward again that evening. She sat in the usual chair and was quiet for a while, which Ward had learned to read as her way of deciding where to begin. "Do you know what the Guardian Order is?" she asked. "Honor Guard," Ward said. "Warrior tradition, old. 40,000 years old. It was founded after a war that nearly ended our species. The Dracori who survived it looked at what had failed them, strategies, weapons, politics, and decided that none of those things were the root of the failure. She paused. The root was that when the moment came, their guardians had calculated. They had weighed their own survival against the mission and chosen survival. In small ways, across many small moments, until the weight of all those small choices collapsed everything. Ward listened. The founding principle of the Order is not strength, she continued. It is the refusal to calculate when calculation leads away from the door you are standing at. A guardian stands at the door. Whatever comes through, they face it. They do not ask if the odds are good. She looked at him. We have spent 40,000 years trying to select for this quality in our people. It is harder to find than physical strength or tactical intelligence. Why are you telling me this? Ward asked. Elder Kova tilted her head. Because you did it without being selected, without training, without a tradition built around the principle. You simply did it, and then did it again the next day, and the day after that, in small ways that no one was watching. She stood. I find that interesting. Ward looked at the two data stones on the surface beside him. Reva uses that word. I know, she learned it from watching me decide what is worth attention. Elder Kova moved to the door. Rest. There is a conversation coming that you will want to be present for. Ward did not sleep well that night. Not from pain. The Dracori medicine had moved that to a manageable distance. He lay awake and turned what Elder Kova had said over in his mind, the way he had turned the first data stone over in his hand, looking at it from different angles. 40,000 years of trying to build a person who would stand at the door without calculating. He had just done it because the door was there, because Reva was on the other side of it, because it would have been wrong to do anything else. He fell asleep sometime before the shift change, still holding that thought. He did not know that outside his room, Elder Kova was already speaking with the assembled guardians. He did not know what she was saying, but across the station, in the lower docking rings, he had walked every day for 14 months. The coolant seal on Bay 14 finally got its replacement part. The supply order had been sitting unanswered for 3 weeks. Someone had pushed it through. Ward would have written that down too if he had known, not because it was important, because it happened. Nobody told Ward what the summons was for. Elder Kova's message was short. Come to the Guardian quarters on Deck 8 when he was cleared to walk. Ward was cleared to walk on the 10th day. He went. Doss offered to come with him. Ward told him it was fine. Doss said he would wait near the lift then, which was not technically coming with him, but was as close as Doss could manage to staying out of something. The Guardian quarters were at the end of a corridor that Ward had never been down before. There were no signs, no announced direction. You either knew where it was or you did not belong there. Elder Kova had told him, and so he found it. He heard the silence before he opened the door. Not the absence of sound, a presence of it. The particular density of quiet that fills a space when many people in it have decided to be still at the same time. He opened the door and stepped inside. There were 11 Dracori guardians in the room. He had not expected 11. He did not know at that point how many guardians were stationed on Aurelius Crossing. It turned out the answer was 11, and every single one of them was in this room. They were standing in a loose arrangement that was not quite a formation and not quite informal. Nera was among them, to the right, her posture as straight as a structural beam. At the center stood Elder Kova. Admiral Sorn stood at the back of the room, beside the wall, not among the guardians. He was not speaking. He was not leaving either. Ward stood inside the door and waited, because it was clear something was going to be said, and he was not the one meant to say it. Elder Kova spoke. She told the room, told Ward what the Guardian order was. He had already heard this, partly, but she said it differently now in front of the assembled Guardians, and it carried a weight that the private conversation had not. 40,000 years, the founding principle, the door. Then she said, we have reviewed the record of Ward Callum in its full form, not one event, the full form, 14 months of work that no one asked him to do carefully, 2 reports that no one answered, a pattern of behavior that is, by every standard this order recognizes, consistent. The room was very still. The Dracori Guardian Order does not grant rank to those outside it. We do not offer membership to non-Dracori. What we offer today is the designation of Kethavar. She looked at Ward steadily. The word does not translate perfectly into standard language. Closest meaning, one who stands at the door. It carries no authority, no formal power, no uniform. She paused. What it carries is this, the word of every guardian in this order. If Ward Callum stands at a door, we stand behind him. The quiet in the room shifted, not louder, but different. Ward stood with it for a moment. He was aware that this was significant. He was aware that it was, by all reasonable measure, one of the most significant things that had ever happened to a human being in Dracori space. He was aware that the correct response probably involved something solemn and carefully chosen. He said, "Does this mean Nera has to be polite to me?" The silence cracked. It was not loud laughter. It was not the kind of laughter that shakes a room. It was deep and low, like something rumbling in old stone, the kind of sound that comes out of beings who do not laugh often and have not forgotten how. Nera's expression went through approximately 4 stages in 2 seconds. The fourth one looked, if Ward was reading it correctly, like she was fighting herself. "It does not," she said, with great precision. Maury laughter, even very briefly, from 2 of the older guardians who Ward would later learn had not visibly found anything amusing in over a decade. Sorn was the last to move. When the guardians began to file out, quiet and unhurried, Sorn stayed where he was until the room was nearly empty. Then he walked toward the door and he stopped beside Ward, not in front of him, beside him, like a man standing next to something he wanted to look at from close range. He did not apologize. Ward had not expected him to. Dracori did not operate that way, and Sorn was about as Dracori as a person could be. What he said was, "Your second flagged report has been entered into Dracori Station Security Doctrine as a training case. The analysis methodology you used." He paused. "You should have been heard." Ward said, "I understand the politics." Sorn looked at him, a long look, the kind that measures something. "That is the part," he said, "that none of us prepared for. Your species understands the politics, and then you act anyway, as if the politics are not the point." He shook his head slightly. "We calculated for many things when we evaluated humanity. We did not calculate for that." He left. Ward stood in the empty room alone for a moment. Rivau was waiting for him outside in the corridor. She had a third data stone in both hands, held out with the same 2-handed formality as the first time. He took it. "What does this one mean?" She looked at him with the amber eyes that had watched him through a viewport in a sealed bay door, that had not been afraid when they probably should have been. "It means I expect you to still be here when I come back," she said. "Where are you going?" "My father's diplomatic tour continues, 4 more stations, approximately 8 months." She tilted her head. "Will you be here?" He looked at the 3 stones in his hand, one that said interesting, one that said glad you survived, one that said come back to. "Yes," he said. She nodded, full, certain, the way she did everything, and walked back down the corridor toward her delegation. Ward stood in the empty hallway outside the Guardian quarters with 3 warm stones in his palm and the distant sound of Doss's footsteps coming from the direction of the lift. "Well," Doss said when he got close enough. Ward pocketed the stones. "I'm going to file my patrol report." Doss stared at him. "You just got made a legend of a 40,000-year-old alien warrior tradition, and the first thing you want to do is file a patrol report. The Bay 14 coolant seal got its replacement. I should log that it's been completed." Doss was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "That is the most human thing I have ever heard in my life." Ward walked back toward the lower docking rings, his station, his door. He pulled out his log pad before he even reached the lift. He had things to write down. They had happened, that was reason enough.